Alright, these are notes on factoring trinomials, and ladies and gentlemen, just so you know, I'm suffering really bad from allergies right now, so if I sound like I'm gasping, I am. But just as a reminder, and I feel like it's important to make this distinction, a binomial has two terms, so x plus 4. A trinomial, which I'm sure you were like, oh hey, tri means 3 terms. Something like that. So what we're going to do today is we are going to actually look at factoring a trinomial. So when I say factor, I mean we're going to break down something that looks like this x squared plus 4x plus 2. We're going to break it down so that way it is 2 different binomials, okay? All right, so some of the things that we do when we factor a trinomial is that we always look for and factor out a greatest common factor if there is one. That right there is always going to be our first step every single time, because otherwise it'll screw us over when we go to look for other factors and other things that multiply and add together. If we don't factor out a greatest common factor, it makes our life so much harder. If the first term of the trinomial is x squared, then the first term in each set of parentheses is going to be an x, just a straight up x. So if the first term of our trinomial, I'm zooming in, was y squared, and I asked you to break it down into 2 binomials, the first term in each set of parentheses would just be a y. Okay. Number 3, find 2 numbers that multiply to give the last term and add to give the middle term. Okay. So this is where this calculator tip is actually really handy, and comes in handy because I use this all the time. This is like the teacher trick. This is when we use y equals whatever the last number is divided by x. And we look at the table, and it's going to tell us all the numbers that add together, or all the numbers that multiply together to equal that number. But if we're lucky, it'll also tell us 2 numbers that add to the middle term. Okay? So if I go to y equals and type in 16 divided by x, and go second table, it tells me all of the numbers that multiply to equal 16. But I'm going to look at them to see which ones add to equal 16. Or add to equal 6, because that's the number we have here in our problem. So factors of 16, I know we have, I'm zooming in, we have 1 times 16, we have 2 times 8, we have, sorry, that's multiplication, not a decimal, 4 times 4, 8 times 2, which is the same thing as 2 times 8. Those are our factors. Okay, so I need 2 of these that add together to equal 6, but multiply to equal negative 16. That's the key. And down here I made a note of it that I highly recommend you copy down into your notes, highlight, bold, do whatever it is you need to do. If the last term is positive, you should have factors with the same sign as the middle term. Okay, so if I had a positive 16, then both of my factors would have a positive number. But if my last term is negative, then my factors are going to have different signs. So one is going to be positive and one is going to be negative. So looking at this group of factors, 1 times 16, 2 times 8, 4 times 4, knowing that my last sign here, or that my sign in the problem is negative, that means one of these numbers has to be negative and the other one has to be positive. And the only combination that we have that'll actually give us a positive 6 is to have a positive 8 and a negative 2. Okay, so that's one way that we can factor. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at this one. We have x squared plus 14x plus 40. So I'm just going to go ahead and go to y equals, type in 40 divided by x, and go to my table. I'm going to write down all the different combinations of 40. So 1 times 40, 2 times 20, 4 times 10, 5 times 8, and then it starts to repeat itself. So notice at the bottom of our screen it says if the last term is positive, I should have factors with the same sign as the middle term. Well, my middle term here is positive. So that means that we're going to have an x, an x. And because my middle term is positive, both of these should be positive. So I'm looking at these groups of factors. I know that they multiply to equal 40, but I need them now to add together to equal 14. Okay? And the only two that add together to equal 14 are 4 and 10. So 4, 10. There we go. Okay. Factors of 21. So let's go type in 21 divided by x. Look at the table. We have 1 times 21, 3 times 7, and that's it. Okay? And again, if the last term is positive, you should have factors with the same sign as the middle term. So my first term is x squared, so I know that I'm going to have x here, x here. My last term is positive, so that means that my factors need to have the same sign as the middle term, so I know that I'm going to have minus signs here. And I need them now to add up to negative 10. And the only ones that add up to negative 10 are 3 and 7. So 3 and 7. And that's my final answer. This one right here. Okay. Here's another one that we have. We have x squared minus 2x minus 8. My first term is an x squared, so I know that the first thing I'm going to write inside those parentheses is an x. If the last term is negative, down here at the very bottom, if the last term is negative, you should have factors that have different signs. Okay, my last term is negative, so I know that even though my middle term is a negative 2, I should have a minus and a plus inside these parentheses. And to answer your question, it doesn't matter which one has the negative and which one has the plus. Okay? But let's go ahead and look at the different factors of 8. Alright, so y equals 8 divided by x. Let's look at our table. We have 1 times 8, 2 times 4, and that's about it. So I know that negative 1 times 8 is negative 8, and negative 8 times 1 is also negative 8. But now I need two numbers that when I add them together give me negative 2. And unfortunately, this 1 times 8 isn't going to work. So let's look at the different possibilities with this 4 times 2. I know already that one of them has to be positive and one of them has to be negative. So if I do negative 2 plus 4 and 2 plus negative 4, which one of these gives me a negative 2? Okay, it's not going to be the top one. It's going to be this one right here. So those are the numbers that we're going to write into our parentheses, our x minus 4 and positive 2. That's our final answer. Okay. All right, so ladies and gentlemen, I'm taking us back to this one, this x squared minus 2x minus 8, just because I want to show you what that might look like in terms of the box method, okay? Because I know some of you solved these instead of foiling. You guys decided to use the box method, so I want to show you what factoring would look like as a box. Okay, so first things first, draw your box. Okay, and now instead of figuring out what goes outside of the box, we're going to figure out what goes inside the box and work backwards. Okay, so your x squared is always going to go in the upper left-hand corner. And your last term, that negative 8, is always going to go down in the bottom right corner. Okay, and so now we know that, and I left this visible on the screen, if the last term is negative, you should have factors that have different signs. Okay, so I know I'm going to have a positive something and a negative something. Okay, and this is where factors of 8 come in. We know that 8 was positive 1 times 8, positive 2 times 4. When I multiply these things together, we get a positive 8. However, we know that it has to add up to a negative 2. So we know that this first 1 times 8 is a no-go. Okay, but I know that there are different options for this 2 times 4. So I know that 2 times negative 4, or 2 plus negative 4, I'm sorry, is actually going to give me negative 2, first times term. Cool. So I'm going to go ahead and fill this in, 2 and a negative 4. Okay. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to look at this column right here in red. So what do they have in common? I know that I can divide both of those numbers if I go to math and do the greatest common factor thing. They both have a positive 2 involved there. So I can actually pull out a plus 2. Okay, I'm stupid. I forgot the x's there. There should be x's in those boxes as well. Sorry. Now looking at this second column, we'll color this one like orange. This one right here. What do they have in common? Well, they have an x. Okay. Now we're going to look at our rows. Okay, this green top row. What does this row have in common? An x. And then we can look at the bottom row, negative 4x and negative 8. What do they have in common? They have a negative 4 in common. So ladies and gentlemen, we just got our factors from working backwards. We have an x minus 4 and an x plus 2. Okay, and don't worry, we'll be doing more examples with the box with later problems. Example, first term is an x squared, so I'm going to write an x there. It tells me at the bottom if the last term is negative, we should have factors that have different signs. So I do have a negative 6, so I'm going to have a minus and a plus. Factors of 6, 1 times 6, 2 times 3. And only a few of them actually are going to add together to equal positive 5. Okay, gonna be, hold on a second, gonna be, it's not gonna be that one. Wow, okay, it's gonna be this one. Okay, so I know that one of them has to be negative and one of them has to be positive because the last term is negative. So the different combinations, we have a negative 1 plus 6 and a 1 plus negative 6. The only one that gives me a positive 5 is this top one. So negative 1, 6, final answer.